career switch rather than working at DU or in higher ed simply for the benefits. I then pursued initially just a couple classes in higher education so I could better understand why decisions seemingly took so long to make, what shared governance was. I was always interested and committed to college access, but thought I would do that work at a nonprofit level rather than within higher education. So the two degrees that one I hold is the MSW. That took me, it's typically a 2-year program. If doing it full time, 90 credits, it took me 5 years. And I mentioned that because it highlights that we are all on our own unique journey and path, and it looks different. So that was my journey. And now I'm currently in a PhD program, not finishing, but working on the dissertation. Hopefully it'll be finished one day. Both advanced degrees have been at DU, and my bachelor's was at CU Boulder.
Thank you. My name is Sharif Rashid. My pronouns are he, him, his. I did my undergraduate in special education in Nigeria, and I also had my master's degree in special education from Grand Valley State University in Michigan. The reason why I decided to go to graduate school, even to have an education, is because of my, disability. When I was growing up, I grew up in a neighborhood whereby people don't go to college, and people, they either do sports or just to go to trade. I saw education as the only option for me to, better my life. And I, right from the beginning, I knew, I'm going to have degrees. I was even planning to have my PhD before I turned 40, and I turned 40 last year. I enjoy education. Based on my disability, I decided to do special education because I wanted to help people with disabilities, because I know the importance of education, how that can change life. I came to the US purposely because of education. I didn't know, I don't have anybody in the US until I came here. I, did research on what type of program I want to do, where I want to go. And I found Michigan to be the place I want to do my master's degree. In my emphasis is in emotional impairment, whereby we help, students who might have emotional, disturbance. After I finished my education, I worked in Wisconsin for like 2 years before I came to Denver in 2016. And I really enjoy what I do at Access Center, whereby we provide academic accommodations to students with disabilities. Based on my personal experience with disability, I know, given proper education and accommodation, anyone can succeed in life with education.
Thank you both for sharing with us a little bit about yourself. The first question then I will get us started with, and I'll have Adrian go first with it, and then Sharif next. Have any of your unique identities played a role in your grad school experience?
Yes, is the quick answer. So I mentioned I was and am a first generation student. So my family, while very supportive, didn't necessarily have all the information they needed to even support me to go to undergraduate at CU. And I remember the first time going to CU initially as like the first step of college, being completely, it felt like I was in an entirely different state, and Boulder's just at the time, even with traffic, 45-minute drive from home. So it was just a very jarring experience to be a compositional minority for the first time. And in my neighborhood, Southwest Denver, most of my peers, really all of my peers and most of my school had very similar life situation and identities than me. So I planned, surprisingly, now that I look back in hindsight, I planned to only try out college. I didn't plan to graduate. I thought I'd try like a semester or two and just see how it went. And scholarship programs and different student organizations I was part of, I attribute to my success in graduating. So when I was looking at a master's degree, it was a similar experience. I didn't know where to start. I didn't even know what the acronyms of GRE, GMAT, LSAT, it was all very unfamiliar to me. So when I started the application process, I knew I had to come up with creative ways to pay for it. So at the time, and this is kind of an identity that has evolved, is over time, I was low income, first generation Latina, and all of those identities are not something that I can just leave at home or take away from my daily experience. So those did then and continue to inform how I navigate education and how I pursue education. I knew that the investment in a degree or in a master's degree, even terminal degree, once I have those 3 letters or 2 letters after my name, it's something that can't be taken from me, that it's something that I'll apply in life continuously. There are some identities that are more salient in different settings, and definitely being Latina, somewhat more visual, being first generation, a pretty invisible identity that I hold, but all of them kind of make me who I am and have helped me navigate different educational aspirations.
I think for me, my disability played a role in my decision to do, my master's program, because growing up, like I said, I know education is the only thing I can use to change my life. And, that's why I decided to do special education. And failure wasn't an option for me because of the confidence and belief my parents they had in me. We are a family of 6. I'm the only one with disability. I'm the only one with a college degree. They look at me, like this is someone who is going to go places. And when I got to graduate school, when I started having some problems, educational system is different from Nigeria, but the only belief that I had was, I can't just fail. I can't disappoint these people because they had so much belief and confidence that I would succeed. That was what kept me, going. And, I thank them for the belief. And if I see someone who is also struggling too, I do tell them, if I can do it, you can do it too, because a lot of difficulties being an international student, coming from a low income family, paying international tuition, that was a lot. But with determination and consistency, I was able to finish my master's program. I know we're going to get to like funding stuff. I'm going to talk about that as well.
Thank you for sharing. I think your identity plays a really big part in why you make decisions and where you go. The next question I have, we'll take from the chat, is what are some things about graduate school that no one really tells you that you should know going into it? And then we'll start with Sharif for this one.
Yeah, what I would say, because I did my undergraduate in Nigeria, I wasn't used to US system of education. I didn't know, because what we did in undergraduate is more of like test exams. There wasn't much of assignments, not until when I got here, like, you have like 2-3 assignments every week. That was very, very difficult for me. It got to a point like I would be scared to even log on to Blackboard. Because each time I log in, like 3 professors will say, oh, you have this, you have that, this one is due this, it was very, very difficult. I wasn't prepared for that. I struggled in my first semester, yeah, I think I got like 1B, 2 C's in my first semester, but, second semester, I tried to buckle up, just sit down. I got to do this and that. And that was really eye-opening for me. I didn't prepare for too much of assignment, projects. I think that was the thing that I will say. Yeah.
And for me, I have kind of two different but related answers to the question. So one is more conceptual. So I worked full time my entire master's program, and I felt like I was the only one working. It felt like at the time my peers were able to focus entirely on their academic pursuit, that they were, if they were working, it was a part-time position. So that felt pretty isolating. I didn't build any relationships with my peers at all. I don't have one single contact from my entire master's program, and I was there for 5 years. And that's a miss. So I'd say for sure, if I can give a piece of advice, build those relationships, because it's also your professional network that you'll take on after your master's program. Working is important. I didn't realize that until I graduated, that I was able, like I mentioned, I built a career in higher education that I wasn't intending or planning on in tandem to this degree. So I was, of course, they're interrelated, but I was able to build skills and apply what I was learning immediately, even though it was somewhat different field, social work and higher education. There's a lot of similarities, especially in the way that I approach my work and responsibility in higher ed to create more equitable systems, more just systems, to acknowledge the structures of power, privilege, and oppression, which I was learning in the Masters of Social Work, and apply that to what ended up being my career in higher education. So that's kind of more conceptually, that work is important. It might feel like I was being pulled in so many different directions and I didn't have enough hours in the day. But I was able to build a really solid resume. And the second is more tactical in organization. I could see throughout my master's program how I was getting more organized over time, but I didn't start the program really intentionally like pulling out, okay, what are the concepts from each course that are important and that I'll build on. So I've built a Google Drive for myself that I like saved all of the articles. I saved my notes so that I can go back and reflect on, okay, what are the concepts that I should learn and carry on into my career, because it's different than undergrad in that I had to take like courses that like chemistry, I've never used the periodic table. So I had to kind of just survive that chemistry class, where a master's degree is really preparing you for a career. It's like diving deep into concepts that we should know and apply in whatever field we're going into. So nobody told me from the beginning, like, create an organization system that works for you and that you can refer back to when you are in your career.
Thank you. Organization is very important. That's something I think a lot of students have had to learn kind of the hard way about. The next question I'll also take from the chat is, how diverse was your campus when you enrolled, and did you feel out of place at all if it wasn't? And we'll start with Adrian this time.
Yeah, so DU is not diverse at all for my master's program. I got used to that a little bit at CU, which is also not diverse. I've gone to all of the institutions I've gone to have been predominantly white institutions, and I felt that it was just a jarring and icky feeling being either the only or one of a few people who had similar experiences to me. And at DU, my assumption, and it was valid in some ways, was that a lot of the students were wealthy enough or had the wealth in their family to pay for a private education. It was hard. I mean, and that experience translates it's to the professional work world. So I was a first gen and am a first gen student. I'm a first gen professional. I'm a first gen executive level professional, which is a whole new ball game. Like I have had to kind of build a network and mentorship, and still, like I say that, and I don't mean to diminish or dismiss how crucially important my family is in my success. So continuing to be in like spaces that are predominantly whiter, or in networks that have to be intentionally curated by me that can support me in different ways, is kind of a reflection of why and how I got through first bachelor's and master's and PhD. But that skill is, it's a skill in and of itself. Like, how do I survive these environments that weren't intended for me or communities that reflect kind of my identities?
Yeah, my university wasn't diverse. I think I was the only Black student in my class. I was the only international student in class. Some of them have not even had any relationship with, someone who was born abroad, and they feel like, oh, do you even speak English and things like that? Is there, not until when you speak with them or you communicate with them, via email or something, they just thought, oh, do they speak English? Why are they even in this program like that? Michigan is not that diverse. I think Grand Rapids, the city wasn't that diverse, maybe 95% white, but, it is what it is. I still, go through it. I enjoy the program, but the professors, they were very supportive. They know, you have different background, perspective, and they try to support you throughout the program.
You. It's good to hear that you had professors that were there to support and be supportive. The next question I will ask, and we'll start with Cherie for this one. How did you know what program was right for you?
Yeah, like I said, from the beginning, I know, I want to help individuals with disabilities. After I graduated from high school, I started doing research about what programs are available in university, what are these programs, what do they do after, what can you do with this program after you graduate from college? And I decided to go for special education. Before I decided to come to Michigan, I tried to do my research about, American with Disability Act, things like that. And I was fascinated about, the program. I applied to a lot of programs, but, I think I got 2 acceptance and I decided to go for the one in Michigan. I didn't struggle about what I wanted to do, because right from the beginning, I know this is what I want to do. And, I know what I want to do after I finish the program.
Mm-hmm. So for me, the last semester of my undergrad degree, which was in psychology, I was working with a faculty member and volunteering and doing like a research project with the Safe House Progressive Alliance for Nonviolence in Boulder, which is a safe house that supports women and children who have been impacted by domestic violence. And there was a specific moment, well, there was many moments, but one specific moment when my faculty support was encouraging me. I was working with a family and a child who had been impacted by domestic violence. Faculty member, what is the problem here with this child? What is a potential diagnosis with this child? And that experience made me like so uncomfortable, because there are so many systems impacting this child: racism, sexism, and as far as how his mother was able to navigate and leave a relationship that was really abusive. And so I felt like psychology was too narrow for me. It was looking at what's wrong with this child and not taking into account the many systems of oppression that have been intentionally built over the last 400 plus years in this country. So social work felt like it took into account those systems of power, privilege, and oppression. And once I got to the program, I also realized that majority of my peers in that program are white women who very well intentioned and I'm sure will and do great work, but it didn't reflect the communities that they wanted to impact, the identities in the program. But I loved and still rely on kind of the critical lens that I built through that program to again, bring forward the systems that oppress different communities. And then my decision to pursue the PhD was one I needed to better understand higher ed. At that time, I had been working in higher ed for 5 years and was working on my master's. So I knew with my master's, if we didn't move swiftly, families were left without resources. It impacted families immediately. And putting that into the higher ed context where a decision can literally take a year or 2 years, it's like it's just really incongruent with like how quickly we need to move. So I decided to, like I mentioned, take some classes in higher ed to better understand the landscape of higher education. And I was starting to make that shift in my career that I can take the social work concepts and apply it to higher ed, I needed to better understand higher ed as a system, which is also racist and sexist and classist and all the things. So that's why I decided to pursue the PhD. Had I known then that the master's would take me 5 whole years, like the master's in social work isn't really intended to be a part-time program. I just made it work for me. And that's kind of been my theme is making excuse my language. No, I won't say it. Making stuff work. I won't say it because we're being recorded. Making stuff work when it's wasn't intended to work the way I need it to work.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think that's an important thing to bring up is, I guess, having to take time to do things and taking a longer time to be able to pursue and get your degree. So my next question, kind of in regard to that, is were you able to work during graduate school? I know, Adrian, you already mentioned that, so I'll have you start with that question.
I was not without struggle. It was really, really hard and still is really, really hard. I've also had to, and part of the reason why I included in my introduction that we're all on our unique path is because that fueled so much imposter syndrome in me that nobody else was working, nobody else was as tired as me, nobody else was doing and had to manage the responsibilities I had. So I've worked full-time, part-time in undergrad, like 3/4 time. And I've always worked full-time for my master's and my PhD. And a PhD is also not designed for working full-time. Again, it feels impossible. It has felt impossible, but I guess I've made it possible. So yes, worked full-time at DU. It was really only because I needed that employee benefit to pay for 20 credits of tuition. And it saved me like $170,000 combined with my master's and PhD program. And I worked in positions that I knew or was frustrated. I was like, I should be in a different position. It felt lower than my skill set. The pay was, my first job was $25,000 annual salary. But just to kind of ease that, I would always just include what I was saving in tuition, mostly just like as a morale boost for myself.
Yeah, I think for me, when I came, there are a lot of things that I had to learn. You know, this is a new system. you are an international student, there are a lot of restrictions. You can't even walk outside of campus. There's a limitation to the, type of work you want to work. But I did not work for a whole year, not until my second year that I got a graduate assistantship that paid for my tuition with a stipend. And that was very, very, helpful. That was how I was able to finish the program, because it was difficult paying international tuition. But working full time would have been a very, very difficult. If I had my way, I wouldn't have even worked. But because of the tuition, the money, that was why I did the graduate assistantship, because it was a lot for me already academically. If I were to be working full time, that would be more challenging. But I only worked 1 year, my final year in graduate school.
And I really appreciate you sharing your experience as an international student. I think that's a really important identity to talk about, as we do have quite a few international students here at MSU Denver. My next question, and since Sharif, you did mention this, how does one get a chance to work on campus with a fellowship or an assistantship or something like that? And then, yeah, we'll start with you, Sharif.
Yeah, it's a lot of things you have to do, and you have to have strong will, because you might have a lot of rejections. Don't let that, weaken your confidence, that because each rejection could give you some, am I able to do this? Am I even good enough to do it? Just, take a day just to think about it, what you might have done better, and just move on. I believe I applied to several fellowships, in the department, in School of Education, a lot of rejections, and I just move on. Not until I had to go to my dean and tell them I really need this, and this is my resume. And I also went to my international student advisor just to share my resume with them, and they sent my resume to different colleges to see who might be looking for graduate assistant, because I cannot work outside campus. That's the only thing I can only work for the university based on my immigration and things like that. That made it more difficult for me compared to a US student who have open work permits. But at the end, I was able to get the graduate assistantship, even though it was very difficult.
And I sort of, the fact that I found employment that had a tuition waiver was my way of sort of creating my own fellowship assistantship. It wasn't that because my supervisor, while supportive, she had no interest in my learning outcomes or making sure I was applying what I was learning to what I was doing. But fellowships, assistantships, there are so many resources that can be really helpful. And I did not know about assistantships or fellowships. I've learned a lot along the way, and I'm glad and I don't regret the way I pursued it, but I do regret not knowing that I could have cobbled together different experiences that wouldn't be so draining as maintaining a full-time work schedule. That's kind of related to Sally's question in the chat. So how we advocate for ourselves when we feel overwhelmed. And because I was working full-time, I was upfront with my supervisor, but at that time I felt like I really had to compartmentalize and not bring school into work and work into school. So at the time, and I think this is still the case, my master's program did not allow part-time students to qualify for scholarships, which is just so backward. It's backward thinking, backward logic, because the people who have to work often are needing scholarships. So I took that, that battle on with our scholarship office, and I didn't win in my time. That's the other hard thing, is that so often students are advocating and serving as activists on top of trying to be a successful student. But advocating for additional resources is also a skill that I've brought into my professional world.
Sharif, would you like to also give some insight on this question on how did you advocate for yourself when your programs were beginning to feel overwhelming?
Yeah, there's this saying that say, if you don't blow your trumpet, who is going to blow it for you? You know, I had no choice other than to advocate for myself. I was able to build some relationship with my professors, like I said in the beginning, going to them one-on-one, sit down with them, this is the program. I purposefully came all the way from Nigeria to do this program. How can you support me? And I try to, they listen to me and they say, oh, this is what you need. You don't take no for answer. If I think one professor is not responding to me, I'll schedule an appointment, to meet with them, sit down with them one-on-one. Like I said, I even went, to meet the dean to talk about, how can we support graduate students? Like Adrian said, sometimes they might say, oh, we are not going to give out this, fellowship to you, but if you go to them, speak to them, I really need this, and I want you to support me in this area, and they decide to support me.
Mm-hmm. One other thing I want to mention with caution is there's so much I didn't know. I never knew I didn't know about extensions until actually working in higher ed with students. I never once requested an extension. I got my assignments in, even if I knew that I was, it was damaging to myself to not sleep an entire night and then go straight to work with 30 minutes of a quick cat nap. Students ask for extensions all of the time. Professors don't have to grant it, of course, obviously, but there's no harm in asking. And I never asked because I thought I had to be the best and the brightest and the most hardworking and get that A. Students ask for extensions all the time. And it's an inequitable structure, because more often it's the students who either have, for lack of a better word, an entitled way of thinking that they deserve the extension, or they have experience with other family members that say ask for an extension. And even if it's a point or two deduction or 3 points deduction, sometimes it's worth it if that means you can meet your human needs of getting a restful night's sleep. And again, I say that with caution because I don't want to say I'll always ask for an extension. Of course not. Deadlines are a real thing. Strive to meet that deadline. But working in a dean of students position, I see that it's a common experience for students to ask for extensions.
Thank you for sharing that. That's also something kind of just to highlight in the chat what Sully mentioned, that sometimes that's something that I'm still trying to navigate, is allowing myself to ask for an extension. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And just self-advocacy overall, that's a really hard, I think, skill for a lot of first-generation students to learn as they're going through the process of being in school. The next question I have for you all is, during your time in graduate school, what was the most challenging part and what was the most rewarding part? And we'll start with Sharif for this one.
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging part of the graduate school is the amount of work that the program requires. Like I mentioned, you have to do projects, presentation, working group. That you might not had a lot of that in undergrad. that could be a challenge if you don't have the skills to work in team, because, you work with other people, sometimes they might not move at your own pace. You have to build some skills in teamwork. That could be difficult. And also the amount of assignment that you need to do, balancing family with, because when I came, my wife joined me 5 months, and I have my daughter then. Balancing, school with family life could also be a challenge too.
Mhm.
And when it comes to the rewarding aspect of it, I think the relationship I've been able to make, I still go to Michigan, meet with people that I met when I was doing my program, have, professors that I can connect with for recommendation or for, support, both morally and educationally. I think that's lasting to me. And I finished the program 7 years ago, I think. I still relate with them. That's very rewarding to me.
Mhm. I agree with a lot of that, and we'll add the isolation, the feeling of isolation that can result from managing a lot of different priorities. There's been just countless times where I've had to skip really important events, activities, whether it's like a birthday party for my family or not my immediate family, but like my extended family. Right, had to get a paper done, so I had to carve out 6 hours each Saturday and Sunday to finish a paper. It's an isolating experience to be to spend more time with your computer some days than you spend with people who matter a lot to you. So that's the hardest. The most rewarding, I'd say, is like the accomplishment, the fact that, like I mentioned in the beginning, no one can take my master's away from me. That I apply that in my everyday life, and knowing that hopefully I'm can serve as like a role model to other first gen or women and people of color, that like it's possible. I don't want to be the only one. I don't want to be the only person at the table representing a certain identity or certain perspective. I want more people at this proverbial table alongside me who can share the experience. So that's the most rewarding, when I can help or support someone else get to those tables.
And I'm going to say something about Adrian's comment about no one can take her master's away from her. I do tell my students, when I see students that says because of their job, they couldn't do the assignment, they are thinking about dropping their class, I'll tell them, job will always be there. If you have your degree, nobody is going to take it away from you. And you are doing this, you are going to school because you don't want to, possibly you might not want to, you want a better job. That's why you want to get a degree. Why can't you focus on your school? Once you have that degree, no one can take it away from you, and you can, you can change your job, but the degree is for you for life.
I love that. I think that's a really, really good thing to remember and to take to heart for any students out there. So, as you have both graduated from your graduate programs, how has your experience helped you in your life after grad school? And we'll start with Adrian.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely helped me in so many different ways. I'd say the PhD and a terminal degree is it's like less than, at least for Latinas, less than 1% of Latinas in the US have a PhD, which it shouldn't be that way. Like there should be more representation. I used to use that as a driving factor of why I need to finish. And I've sort of complicated that because I don't want to be part of like just a small sliver. But the PhD has also helped open up opportunities that that would have never been available to me. Even my position now, the fact that I was pursuing a PhD helped me land this role. Similar to an MSW, it opens a lot of opportunity. And there's a trend right now where that I support conceptually, that degree requirements are challenged because in job positions and postings, because that narrows the pool quite a bit as far as who's competent and capable to be in so many, in whatever role it is. I still will always advocate for college access, bachelor completion, even with that kind of argument in the sidelines. So just the amount of opportunity that I can apply to and secure, it makes a big difference.
I think for me, the degree has helped me in the sense that I'm in the US today because of the education, because the immigration path that I took was based on my education, my job. Well, if not for my education, I won't get the job. If I don't have the job, I won't have the visa that I'm using to get my green card. I think, that's a very big accomplishment when you look at, someone coming from, other country using education to remain in the US. And also, not just for me, I have a cousin who is now finishing her medical school in Canada today. When I was doing it, she was looking up to me that, if I can do it, she can do it too. And she will be graduating her medical school this coming May in Canada. That's a big accomplishment for me, and also trying to other people looking up to me as well. It's a big thing for me.
Thank you for sharing that. I love to hear that piece, because as first generation students, as all of us, most of us here, I think a lot of us here as first gen students are leaders and do really pave the path for people in our lives who haven't been to college and never thought that they could get as far as we all have. And I think that's something to be very, very proud of. I guess we have about 10 minutes left. So does anybody want to unmute or ask any questions to our panelists? Type anything in the chat. And in the meantime, as you come up with those questions, I will ask our panelists, what is something you want to still tell students who are applying to graduate school? And we'll start with Sharif.
Yeah, I would tell them to believe in themselves. You don't need to be the best to do a graduate program. You can just be ordinary person, do graduate school and don't think that you cannot do it. And when you get there, if you are experiencing some challenges, just believe that that's just normal course of life. It's going to go away. If you don't quit, you are going to win. I believe in that. And seek out for help. Don't depend on yourself alone. If you see someone that you think you share the same path or experience, ask them for support. Even just advice might be something that will change your path. And your mental health as well is very important. You look into that, because graduate school, like she said, it could be very isolating. Your family, when I was doing my graduate school, I'll call my mom from Nigeria. Oh, this is what I'm experiencing. And she will encourage me, I'm looking forward to you graduating and you can do it. It's going to be difficult. That 5 minutes talk with her was very, very helpful to me. Seek out support wherever you can get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said it very well. First of all, you're needed. you're needed, and I can say with confidence, and no matter the degree you're pursuing, you're needed in that field. Remember your why. So what is the reason you're pursuing this degree, and remind yourself of that why when things get hard, because they're bound to get hard. And one thing that I have to remind myself of often is that my best looks different depending on what I'm going through in life. In our kind of opening catch up with Sam, I mentioned I have two kids. I have a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they have replaced all of my priorities in sharing the spot for number one priority. So sometimes like a B type of work, that's what my best looks like. I can't, the hours in the day, my energy is a finite resource. And I used to think that I can just, if I could will my way out of really challenging situations. That's not, that's flawed thinking. That we can only take on literally so much, and that doesn't reflect on who we are as a person or our character. We have to come up with different strategies that work for us and adapt those strategies because life looks different. And to build off of what Sharif mentioned, that our mental health, if we're not well and we're sacrificing our health and wellness to get a paper in or to pursue a master's degree, it's not what we should be doing. And universities will take everything you give them. So if you give them 100% of your time, they will take it and ask for more. So we have to be responsible for setting appropriate boundaries around what our life demands.
Both for sharing that, especially the part about mental health. I think a lot of students don't think about that, or kind of like Adrian was saying, try to will yourself through things. So I think it's important to take some time to really take care of you and your people around you and everything else. We do have about 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask? Feel free to unmute, put it in the chat.
I have one that we asked the panelists yesterday about what was most rewarding or beneficial about your graduate experience, or is, Adrian, since you're still studying?
Sure. Gosh, I don't know what's most rewarding. I sort of built a memory in advance, a memory from the future, which is kind of a strange thing to do, where I like see myself graduating for this PhD and see like my family proud, my kids proud, who I'm going to invite and how I'm going to thank them to my dissertation defense. So that memory that has not yet happened is my most rewarding thing, which can, I mean, it's tricky because I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I have to get ahead of myself to, like, again, remember my why.
I think there's a question about how did you guys deal with your mental health, or what were you able to do when you felt like was a bit too much to handle? Yeah, like I said, find someone or people that you trust and talk to them. And like she said about why do you think you are doing the program, have that in your mind. And there's some resources on campus that you can utilize to the counseling center. Every university has that. You can go to them if there's a family member that you trust, and you can seek advice from them, or someone that you think, because sometimes, if you don't have someone who look like you, might share the same experience or background with you, it might be difficult, talking to them, because you feel like they might not even understand you. But I believe there will be someone that you talk to them, share your experience, seek guidance and support from them. And, exercise is also good, meditation, all sorts of things, just to make sure. And like she said that, if you need extension, ask for it, because sometimes it gets very tough. Don't feel like I have to finish by this deadline. You know, if you need extension, ask for it. Even if they are going to say no, just make sure you ask for it first.
Mhm. I'll add on a little bit to start a program with your non-negotiables, whatever that list looks like. I have 3 non-negotiables. I'm making things up right now, but I'll take a hike every weekend. I'll take a nap on some, or I'll spend time with family. These are the non-negotiables that you can refer back to. And sometimes those non-negotiables have to and should and must adapt as you go through, but also know listen to your body and including. I feel like one of my challenges is I used to sort of divorce mental health and physical health, and we can't do that. We're in one body. Our brain and our heart is part of our system, and they're intertwined. And so I know now, like, what are my signs from my body telling me that I need to step down or I need to step away from something. And for me, it's usually my shoulders, my head, like so much tension that it's unbearable. And so when I feel that coming up, I'm like, all right, need to tap into what my body's trying to tell me.
Thank you both for all of your insight and your knowledge that you brought to us today. With our office, we like to do snaps to thank our panelists. So let's give them some snaps, give a hand clap, just something to kind of help make them feel appreciated for their time that they gave us today. We are still doing graduate school days or grad school days the rest of the week. So make sure you continue to attend those and sign in if you haven't already. And Sam, I don't know if there's anything you want to say or if any of our panelists want to say anything to kind of wrap us up.
I just want to say something about funding. There are scholarships out there that you can apply to. You don't need to pay for it yourself. Everything, seek out for scholarship, talk to your financial aid office. There are different scholarships. There are general scholarships. There are identity related scholarships like, first generation scholarship, student with disability scholarship, international student scholarship, all sorts of things that, you can apply to.
Thank you, Sharif. And thank you, Sharif and Adrian, so much. I really appreciated everything you said and related to a lot of it myself. So it's kind of nice to hear some affirmations and things like that again. And I also want to say thank you to Alicia for being our moderator. Great job. So if you want to, clap or snap or put the emoji for Alicia as well. And that's it. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.